Hey everyone, wow, the moral hazards of bailing out, it started out after the 2008 crash. Well, it's not as if it was the first time it's ever happened, but because of historical precedent, and then once again, due to the fear-mongering and the scare tactics used by those in the establishment media, the establishment politicians, and those crony corporations, those who represent those crony corporations, they had everyone fearful after the great crash of 2008 that, oh, we better bail out, whether it was the banksters or the auto industry. If not, well, just think of the perilous dangers. Think of how many people will lose their jobs. So, forget about doing the right thing. We know how immoral it is to force taxpayers to subsidize and bail out these corporations, because obviously these corporations, they were either doing something wrong as far as their business model, or maybe they just weren't viable. Whatever the reason was, none of us can actually know 100% what the reason was behind or the cause of the collapse or the downfall of these organizations or these mega corporations. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar global conglomerates at this point in time. But like I said, we were told at the time that if you don't bail them out, oh, the sky will fall and that's it. That'll be the end of it. We'll all be done for. We'll all be hammered back into the ice ages, right? And once again, people were more than willing, based on that fear tactic, they were more than willing to say, okay, yeah, let's forget about doing things right. Let's forget about the free market. Let's forget about making these bad actors have to own up and suffer the consequences of whatever they did that caused that to happen in the first place. So once again, we seen, no, they said, listen, we're going to save the economy by forcing the taxpayers, or at this point the unborn, to bail out these multi-billion-dollar corporations or these corrupt banking institutions that have placed us all in very precarious and dangerous situations as far as our economic lives go, and which basically affects all of our lives, because everything that we do is built on economics, right? Because, you have to feed yourself, you have to have a roof over your head. Those are the very minimal aspects of economics, but without that aspect of economics, without your ability to feed yourself and keep a roof over your head, well, that's literally what sustains you as a human being, to survive and exist on this planet. But as I said, and as a few other people, but once again, a very tiny minority of people, right, that were saying even subsequent to that, people like even Peter Schiff, that were saying subsequent to the economic crash that, yeah, sure, you might have bailed them out. You might have saved the auto industry. You might have saved this particular crony corporation or these banking institutions. You might have achieved that. Yes, you did do that, but what are the unintended or potentially intended consequences as a result of doing so? Well, once again, it comes down to you've set a precedent. Too big to fail, or, ooh, we're not allowed to let these corporations fail because, oh, it can be dangerous and cause economic hardships that has the potential to affect many, many people's lives. Well, we're seeing now today that mentality, that fear-mongering, well, now that's the excuse, that's the reason given now, I guess. That's what all these central planners are using as the basis for all their decision-making going forward. And we're seeing the consequence of that post 2008. It's actually been ramped up. The bailout processes, and now there's basically no segment of the economy that's off the table as far as forcing the taxpayer or the unborn to bail them out whenever they get themselves in trouble. Come on, and Ken, the list is long and extensive, folks. We're already hearing, we're barely just now, forget about the banking institutions and Bombardier or the auto manufacturing. We're seeing even now today, look what we're hearing from GM. All the billions and billions of dollars stolen and plundered from the Canadian taxpayer or the unborn to prop up GM, right? And now GM's pulling out of Oshawa. Thousands of jobs are going. So what, did it work out? No, like I said, a little short term, but once again, now, even after all that intervention in the economy, even after squandered billions and billions of dollars, well, it only prolonged the pain, the inevitable pain, and it's still going to happen. So failure already. But in addition to all that failure, we're seeing now too where you have these corporations now, such as those in the media who are now kind of sitting there anxiously waiting and chomping at the bit and hoping that the government will bail them out. And Trudeau liberals have said, hey, you know what? We might very well do so. I guess they're going to set up a $600 million package now to bail out that segment of the economy. I mean, that's one area of the economy that you definitely don't want government helping. I mean, well, as far as I'm concerned, there should be no such thing. I mean, the economy and government should be completely separate, folks. You know, separating the economy from government is actually the very basis. Just like the separation of church and state, well, no, you should have the separation of the economy and the state as well. I mean, we've already seen the perilous dangers and the potential harm and injury that can happen as a consequence, as a result of governments intervening in the economy. You know, picking winners or losers. But when it comes to the media, you know, these are the people that are actually supposed to be holding people in positions of power or authority to account. The media is supposed to hold governments to account. But if the government is, you know, subsidizing them or paying them or propping them up with bailout money, well, where's the incentive for these institutions or these organizations or these media personalities to hold the government to account when the government's helping to feed them, right? You don't usually bite the hand that feeds you. That's just a natural incentive, folks. You know, that's, I mean, come on, we can all recognize that. But now we're seeing, in addition to all of this, and like I said, I know I was quite long-winded to set up this, but once again, it's another example, and I just want to at least lay out the precedent that's already been set, which is the reason why stuff like this continues to happen. Headline out of the Toronto Star: Maple Leaf Foods gets $34.5 million for London plant from Ontario government. It's being reported by Kristen Roshawi, Queen's Park Bureau, November 27, 2018. It's not chicken feed. Ontario taxpayers are giving Maple Leaf Foods $34.5 million towards a new $660 million poultry processing plant in London, Premier Doug Ford announced Tuesday morning. So, I mean, Doug, he's just as much, apparently, well, that's the thing. He seems to be completely in line with this cronyism. So as much as people have, you know, respect for Doug as far as being against some of these ultra leftist policies, what we're seeing today is there's no one out there on the political landscape that we're seeing in any establishment parties that are actually going to be principled both socially and economically when you're talking about their policies. Now it's just, once again, picking lesser of evils or perceived lesser of evils, and the Ontario people definitely perceived Doug Ford as the lesser of evil, but once again, you still end up with evil. And Doug Ford is showing that he's willing to be evil as well, right? Maybe to a lesser degree than the Kathleen Wynne liberals or the McGuinty liberals that came before them, but once again, corruption breeds corruption, and we're seeing that now because it's so entrenched and so embedded into our social, economic, political structures that, well, good luck trying to escape or get out from underneath this at this point in time, folks. The investment in this facility, it's not only the largest investment in the poultry industry, but the largest investment in food processing ever in Canada, Ford said in the Southwest Ontario city. That's why we put up the $34.5 million, creating great jobs. 1,450 directly plus 1,700 construction and spin-off jobs, said Ford. The London plant is also receiving $20 million from the federal government, and Ford said the facility will modernize processing and help make Ontario's chicken farmers more competitive by boosting food safety, productivity, and animal welfare. News of the money for the London plant comes on the heels of Maple Leaf's announcement that it will close 3 plants by 2022, including one in Toronto, which employs about 680 United Food and commercial workers. So once again, just like with GM is already closing, I think, what is it, 6 plants now in North America, in the U.S. and Canada. And, I mean, who's to say that maybe the Liberals or someone will step in, one of these central planning hacks in the establishment parties in this country will step up and try to subsidize or bail them out once again. And I mean, think about that, folks. What kind of situation are we going to find ourselves in if every time some segment of the economy, which I'm telling you, you're going to see this happen a whole lot more, especially going forward, at least over the next 10, 15 years, you're going to see a lot of portions of the economy collapse, crash, or go through a serious amount of restructuring. Because, you know, change happens in the world, right? But that change should happen, you know, with the government leaving its hands the fuck off. Stop forcing me and everyone else in Canada to have to try to prop up these corporations and keep them sustained a little longer when we know that maybe just a year or 2 years down the road, it was all in vain. It was all a waste. No, let corporations survive or die based on their economic and their business model. That's the free market at work, folks. That's how things are supposed to happen. But once again, because we realize that, look at the precedent's been set. So now we're seeing, no matter if it's a conservative government or a liberal government or, well, definitely the NDP. Well, if the NDP were in charge, they'd nationalize every fucking goddamn business in this country and we'd just live under full socialism. But even now the liberals and the conservatives, under people like Doug Ford, the guy that you thought, oh, he's a free market guy, right? No, we're seeing time and time again, folks. It's just a bunch of snake oil salesmen that are trying to trick you into falling for a line with their political rhetoric because the other guy's worse than we are, and you know the other guy's worse than we are, so you better pick us. Well, like with most Canadians, or at least a substantial portion of Canadians, I think we're all getting to the point where we're sick of picking the lesser of the evils. We need a real, genuine choice. One choice. And you know what? Oh, that's right too. We actually do. Federally, provincially, not so much. Not so much. But federally, we as Canadians are going to have one serious choice, one serious contender in 2019 that's challenging all this shit, that's challenging all the status quo, and it's finally willing to do the right thing, to do the hard thing. But you know what? The hard thing, yeah, you're going to suffer short-term pain. But doing the right thing usually requires some short-term pain, but a whole lot of long-term gain. So come on, Canadians, be willing to accept some short-term pain if you want that long-term gain. Stop constantly putting off the inevitable, because that long-term gain, well, it's never going to come to fruition if you never deal with the hardships or doing the right things in the here and now. If you just keep kicking that can down the road, well, you find at some point in time that can is not a can anymore. It's just a big pile of bent, rusted, deteriorated, and destroyed metal that has no applicable use for anybody. Anyways, I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below. But once again, I'm seeing, how are we still willing to allow this to happen? How are Canadians not at least putting their petty differences aside and saying, you know what, no, I'm tired of fighting with my neighbor or my coworker or my brother or my aunt or my uncle or what, over little tiny nuances as far as what I think how government policies should be set. How are Canadians not getting to the point where, okay, let's just stop arguing amongst each other. We should recognize, hey, we're not the ones doing all this shit. We're arguing amongst each other, but we're not actually having any effect at all in the social economic environment. These control freaks, these authoritarians are. Maybe we should put our differences, our petty differences aside and say, you know what? No. Even though I might be all about the cartel, I'm willing to set aside my own position as far as someone that respects the dairy cartel, or oh, maybe I got a cousin that works for Bombardier, or maybe I got a nephew that works for GM. We got to all stop putting aside our own personal anecdotal experience where we should make an excuse for governments to bail out a particular segment of the economy. We should all say, listen, we're willing to accept that short-term pain because we recognize that if we don't, well, it's not going to be short-term. It's going to be a long-term game with a whole lot of pain. And that pain can get a whole lot worse if we don't change course. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.